Baker Show.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to getthetea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. Getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
That's right, everyone. I am your host. I am Kev Baker, and this is indeed the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com, where we offer you protection from deception, and we would like to say that silence is contempt. Now then, before we get into tonight's amazing show, what a way to kick off the week. Got Charlie Robinson joining me all the way from the US. But a quick word about some of the things going on behind the scenes. Now, I've obviously got the website, kevbakershow.com, and over the weekend it was really synchronistic because myself and my good friend Nancy, we both discovered at exactly the same time that when you go to kevbakershow.com, we seem to be having a problem. You're met with a blank screen of death. Now, I've been working back and forth with GoDaddy today, and I would love to hype this up and say they're doing an Alex Jones to me. They're kind of shadow banning me, stuff like this. But no, it's administrative problems behind the scenes, folks. So I'll be restoring that as soon as possible. But if you do see the website down, don't be thinking it's the NSA or the GCHQ. It's honestly just something between myself and GoDaddy behind the scenes with the hosting company. So I just want to throw that out there before it becomes some non-conspiracy that starts going around in the chat room or beyond. And talking of the chat room, if you want to head on over there with all the great people, all the great ideas they share back and forth during the show, you can get there by going to tfrlive.com/chat. And I urge you all to check that out. And I'm sure regular listeners will be able to tell already. I'm back to my very talkative self after that horrid chest infection I had. And no better time, because tonight's going to be great. We're going to break down all the current events, and we're going to put them into some kind of historical perspective, because that's when you start to connect the dots and the bigger picture emerges. And you start to see the agenda not just playing out now, but how it's always been in the works for a very, very long time. And to help me doing this is somebody that I love working with. He's such a nice guy, loves to have a good laugh like myself, and he's also the author of The Octopus of Global Control. It's a controversial and hilarious book that features the opinions of over 500 experts that expose and explain the century-long plan for world domination by the global elite. Now, Charlie himself was front and centre for all the fraud and corruption in the mortgage industry, which during his 10-year career in Las Vegas real estate, and he also pays homage and credit to somebody called John Perkins. Now, for anyone new coming to the information, I urge you all, as with Charlie, to check out the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, because this basically gives you the inside story of how the US government and other governments around the world basically go into countries and bring them down from the inside. Now, this was the final piece that helped Charlie to really see how the American government operates. Charlie's also an entrepreneur with a marketing degree from the University of Southern California and agrees with the legend that is Bill Hicks, that everyone in marketing should kill themselves. And of course, never forget, folks, that it's just a ride. So then, Charlie, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me back. How you doing? How you feeling?
Well, I am feeling really good this week. Last week I was suffering from a pesky cold. It's that time of year. Everyone seems to be sniffling and coughing away. But since we last spoke, Charlie, I'm feeling all the wiser as well, because I went and indulged in 5 hours of somebody we both pay high regard to, and that is, of course, David Icke. I know you're going to be seeing him early next year, and all I can say to you, sir, is wow, are you in for a treat? It was everything we thought it would be, Charlie.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to see him in Anarchapulco in Mexico, the middle of February 2019, if people are interested in going. It's going to be a good one. It's the anarchist convention that is also mixed in with cryptocurrency convention. Ron Paul will be speaking. David Icke will be there. Dr. Cynthia McKinney, I should say.
Ron Paul and David Icke, over a tomahawk steak, talking about reptilian agendas and things like that. That's what I'm talking about, dude.
I'm also going to be speaking there, so I'm going to try and inject myself into that conversation if it happens. I'll just sort of stand quietly by, listening as hard as I can to what that conversation would be like. Yeah, that'll be fun. So tell me more about it. How was this? I've watched his presentations online, and of course you get a lot of information that you don't get the vibe of being there. What was the vibe like of being there? What was it like to be in a group of people that are sort of open to the idea that everything that we know about the world is a lie?
It's amazing. And like I was saying to you, I mean, I like to watch groups of people, and I was shocked to see such a wide demographic. We had young people, males, females, couples. We had groups of guys, groups of girls out. We had older people as well. It was a really, really broad kind of spectrum that was covered. And you're right, it's like your favorite pop group, your favorite rock band. It's one thing listening to their CD or watching the concert on the telly, but it's another thing. It's a totally different vibe, a whole new frequency to be there. And I found the whole entire thing, Charlie, not only uber informative, but really uplifting as well, because you look around that room, and I would say there was up to 1,000 people there, and you realize that you truly are not alone. And you see this awakening that we speak of in motion. David himself referred to the fact that 20 odd years ago, he spoke to about 20 people in Glasgow, if that, and most of them were coming to abuse him. So it shows you how people really are starting to get it. And of course, everything when it comes to Icke, it all boils down to frequency. And that's what we speak about a lot on the show here. And I think, as a tip of the hat to shows that we've done in the past, we talk a lot about transhumanism. And you know what, Charlie? That is something that David Icke, he has put front and centre of the highest importance in his presentation. And even watching his YouTube videos, you can tell that that's the one thing he really wants to get across to people, because everything else, it's just details, it's just minutiae, and it's where we're heading as a civilization.
Well, it's interesting that people talk about the melding of humans with computers and things like that, and David Icke has done a lot of work on the concept of, well, I don't know if it's a concept, but the reality of frequencies and how you can change that, and how it's like tuning in a radio station. You've got all these radio signals out there, but you tune your radio to a specific frequency and you will pick up that and only that. Anyone that has ever done any sort of hallucinogenic drugs will understand that there is a world beyond your eyes. If you're just going by what you see or what you hear, you're missing it. It's like taking your brain and turning it and tuning it to a different frequency as well. So there's another world out there. People can live in the real world, as we all do, and go about their daily lives and have no interaction, no crossover with that other sort of dimension, if you want to call it that. But when you tune in that frequency to another channel, it's there. It's as real as the world you're living in now. So when he was talking back in the days about reptilians and things like that, he took a lot of heat for it, and because people are envisioning people coming out of their skin and turning into dinosaurs and then turning back into people with their shredded clothes on, like the Hulk or something like that. And what he was saying all along was, no, this is a frequency issue. This isn't so much that the person is changing. What is happening is that your perception of the person is changing because it's moving to a different frequency. And like I said, if someone's done mushrooms before, they understand that that's a part of it. You get tuned into a different frequency. It's very real, and it's been a real thing for those that have experienced it. Now you get the transhumanist agenda where they want to take everything and change the frequency and put that frequency inside some container that will live forever, being some artificial body or a Stephen Hawking type computer system that you've got with you or whatever. People always kind of joked about it, like the brain in the jar, sitting off in behind with the bubbling water and everything. But
the Steve Martin movie, The Man with Two Brains.
Right.
But it's funny you mentioned the psychedelics there, because anyone who's followed David Icke's work will know that a major part in his awakening, for lack of a better term, was that he was led by a series of synchronicities to Peru. And in Peru, he took part in ayahuasca ceremonies. And he was talking, about how in this other dimension, this other frequency, another channel, like he likes to call it, Charlie, he was communicating with entities that were basically telling him how things were going to play out in the 20 years ahead. So there is so much more apart from the reality that we're decoding right now. You in front of your computer with a desk in front of you, me here with the same kind of kit. There's so much more going on round about us and in between us that quantum physics, and Icke was keen to press home the importance of this, it's really showing us that there is so much more to reality. In fact, all probabilities are possible. Yeah.
And it's mind-blowing, of course, and we live in a society that is actively trying to remove possibilities from us and say that we only have two choices for president, or we only have this many choices for what kind of job we're going to take in our lives. And the reality is that there really are unlimited possibilities of things that can happen, and so he's fighting against the corporate media and the government that's trying to limit our perception, and he's trying to expand it by saying, listen, don't just believe me, get out there and experience this for yourself. A lot of the things that he talked about 20 years ago, 10 years ago are reality now, and so he should get credit for that. I've always thought that. I always think that he takes a beating for being controversial, but he's never given the credit he deserves when he's correct about things. Like how a newspaper will run an article about somebody just destroying them, filled with lies, and then it comes out that was filled with lies, and then they print the retraction to it, but the retraction's on the back page, and it's written in like 9-point font, and it's really small and nobody sees it. So with David Icke, they've always been really quick to blast him if he's wrong about something, but when they want to give him credit for being correct, it's just sort of an afterthought that that they mentioned maybe in the at the tail end of something. But he deserves, if nothing else, he deserves a ton of credit for having the thickest skin of a human being that I've ever seen, because he's been taking a beating verbally by people for 25 years, and he has done it with class and dignity. He stood up and said, I let's debate this. Let's talk about this. And nobody wants to debate him about it. He'll destroy them in a debate, in a nice way. But of course, he's just pointing out the inaccuracies and the inconsistencies and the hypocrisy of the system. And the reason why why his audience is 1,000 now instead of 5 is because he's had an impact, and people are waking up, and they believe what he's been talking about, and they want to know more. And I think that people want to paint him with this, he's like an evangelical, Jim Jones type leader.
Well, in the UK, that was one of the kind of propaganda angles that they kind of tried to associate to him. They tried to make out he was saying he was the second coming of Christ, some divine entity, some channel from God. Yet, when in reality, when you listened to Icke, he never used to say anything like that at all, Charlie.
No, he said in that in that interview, the one where he's in the light blue sweatsuit, where everyone says that he said he was the son of God. What he said was he was a son of God. If you've ever had a hallucinogenic experience, not necessarily in Peru, but anywhere, your concept of what is God changes. It is not to say that I am the son of God. It is, it's fair to say we're all a part of a God in some form or another, but they spun it in the way that he said he's the son of God and therefore he's crazy and nobody should believe him. Well, if he's really crazy, if he's truly one of those guys standing on a street corner talking to a lamppost, then what do you care? What does the nightly news care? Why do they have to go after him? Why does the ADL have to go after him?
If he's attention to these people normally, so when you see this level of flack, that should tell you, right? They don't want people listening to what he's got to say. So on the flip side of that, I want to hear what he's got to say.
Oh, absolutely, because they don't want me to hear what he has to say. Yeah, if all he's going to talk about are lies and fake news and things like that, then what's the problem? We should if it's so fake, don't worry about it. Well, the reality we all know is that they're not concerned about his fake news. They're concerned about his actual news. They're concerned about what he's saying, because he has a charisma and he has a way of explaining things. He has a way of taking complicated subject matter and explaining it in a way that makes it very easy for people to relate to in their own lives. They can say, "Oh yeah, I experienced something similar to that when this happened to me at work," or whatever the situation is. People find a way to connect with his story because he makes it accessible to them. He makes it understandable to them. And let's be honest. I mean, the topics are dark. The topics are serious. And he finds a way to bring some humor into that. And I like him a whole lot. And he's going to be wrong about some things. I said that about when I wrote my book, that I'm going to be wrong about some things. And though I don't like that aspect of it, I have to acknowledge that, you're going up against professional disinformation agencies like MI6 and CIA and Mossad and organizations like that are professional liars. You're going to get things wrong, but that can't stop you from continuing on and telling as much of the truth as you can, even if you have to go back later and say, "Hey, I was wrong about that one aspect of it." That's fine. We're all going to be wrong.
Well, I love you, man. It takes a bigger man to sit and admit that. And I've always said, I'm wrong more times than I'm right, Charlie. And that's just being human. Do you know what I mean? And if you're ever following anyone out there, folks, this applies to me and Charlie. If we ever find ourselves agreeing with absolutely every last thing that somebody says, you need to step back. You need to really kind of disassociate and look closer, more logically. Don't become so emotionally attached where you're really agreeing with everything just for the sake of it, because everyone will make mistakes. And if I ever find anyone that doesn't, Charlie, that will be a red flag. But one other thing that Ike was really kind of speaking about at length, and I love this because so many of the people around me, they're starting to feel this way as well. And it's all to do with this political correctness. It's absolute insanity. And he was saying now we've got a new religion that is sweeping the planet. And that religion is the religion of I'm offended. Because absolutely everybody is offended by anything these days. And in reality, they're being offended by things that don't even exist. So it's almost as if while all this transhumanist agenda is moving forward, we're literally changing the psyche of what it is to be human in the first place.
Well, I'm offended that they're offended.
Exactly. And I'm offended that I had to say that they're offended and deal with your offendedness.
Well, when I was in college, I don't remember there being safe spaces. I don't remember there being 53 different gender pronouns. I don't remember being able to go to the dean of the university and telling them I don't want certain people coming to the campus to speak because they offend me. I don't know what the colleges think they're doing, if they think they're preparing the students for the real world. Because if you're offering safe spaces, if you're telling everybody you can't offend anybody with anything, and you've got to use the right gender pronoun or somebody's going to be offended and then you're going to be in trouble for it because you didn't know that person was a Zim or a Zed or whatever. I mean, this is not preparing people for the real world. This is preparing people to get to their first job and have their boss go, get out of here. You need to grow up. You need to, get some thicker skin. And this is ridiculous. People don't run businesses based on the fact that you might offend somebody. So I've got to put in a third bathroom. This is out of control. I think even people that are legitimately gender confused would be sort of roll their eyes at the fact that Facebook has 51 different gender options for them. I mean, it's gone so far, it's swung so far the other way, like, oh, we don't want to offend anybody, so we're just going to try and make everybody happy. What happens when you do that? You can make...
It's like a feedback loop, Charlie, because before all of this started, and I mean, no offense to anyone for their own personal choices they make in life, anything like that, but I don't think there was any great problem with people being gender confused. And then you have this mass media campaign, and I'm still actually yet to physically meet anyone in the real world that has these problems. I'm not saying they don't exist. However, it's magnified and it's multiplied online to the point where it ends up, it does confuse people. And that's what's making people confused about what they are or what they might not be or what they think they are. There's something far wrong with that, dude.
Yeah, I have a ton of sympathy, and I can't even imagine how difficult it must be for someone to grow up being unsure of their gender or to have, multiple sets of genitalia, and to have this sort of like, oh God, I get to high school and I wonder what it's going to be like in the locker room. That's got to be an unbelievably difficult experience to go through for life. But it's swung so far the other way that if you say the wrong word, that you've somehow offended an entire group of people. I just don't know about that. I mean, I know that every generation, a bunch of words become off limits. And sometimes that's for the best. Sometimes you're just being, some people were really racist and used words, and then those words kind of got cut out, and people were calling people retarded, and then that took on a bad rap, and people say, oh, you can't say that anymore because it's offensive to people with mental illness. Yeah, people that are mentally impaired. I get that, and people aren't trying to be mean and disrespectful by doing that. That turned into sort of like a slang term for using the word retarded and retard and all that. And then, God, you see what happened to Tom Segura, the comedian. He put that in his act, and people just went nuts and attacked him and said he was a horrible person. Everybody's offended by everything these days. And so when I see that, my instinct is to try to offend those people even more, just because I don't like.
We are bad people, but Dr. Kayak in the chat room, he says, I've been in those special kinds of circles where if I refer to a group by saying, hey guys, I'm pounced on for indicating the male gender only. And he makes a really good point here, Charlie. What's ironic is that it's actually a sign of intolerance that people are enforcing gender pronouns on others. And that's what I find. It's people that aren't even involved in this that are the most vocal online. You have people, blatantly white people, shouting about how everything in the problem is down to white people, it's problem crazy in the world. It's almost, and I don't like to say mental illness, but there's a form of brainwashing, I think, is going on here.
Yeah, and it's a weaponization of words. It's taking certain words and making them off limits, and words that shouldn't have been off limits in the first place. This is back to Orwell. Back to Orwell's book, 1984. They talked about removing words from the vocabulary so that things didn't exist. I saw an interesting documentary there talking to a North Korean guy who had escaped and was in South Korea, and he was talking about his experience there. And someone asked him, what do you call this? And showed him a picture of a scorpion. And he said, we don't have a word for that. And they said, why don't you have a word for that? And he said, well, scorpions don't exist in North Korea, so we don't ever need to have that. We don't ever need to know that information doesn't apply to us. So therefore we don't have a word for it. And I thought, oh my God, that's crazy that what they've done is they've just removed a whole bunch of words out of the possibility to choose from, which is what they did in the book 1984. They just started taking words away. And now what I'm seeing is they're taking words away from us as well. So you can't call people things. And
it's I'm offended. But that's where we are. And I've got a bit of a kind of double conspiracy on North Korea, Charlie. I think, right, since the only times we ever hear anything about North Korea is either via one, the mainstream media, can't trust them, they're up there with NASA. Politicians, equally can't trust them. Or these defectors that are appearing on mainstream media, can't trust them. What if it's an absolutely banging place, man?
It's a paradise.
Las Vegas on steroids, dude. We're all missing out on like holiday destination number one. Kim Jong-un and the party girls. It's all great there, dude.
Yeah, that's probably what's going on.
And it's a bit of a kind of sarcastic way of saying, you know, I struggle really to hate, or not hate, but share the opinion that North Korea is the place that we all think it is, merely because any information we have on North Korea comes from these questionable sources. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute it's a good place, folks. I get the fact that it's an evil dictatorship where there's death camps and everything else. But it just shows you how we're willing to believe the mainstream media when it comes to something like that, Charlie. Yet 9 times out of 10 will discount anything they say.
Well, I remember when Russia, in the 80s, people in the United States would shake their heads and go, those poor Russians, they just get lied to. They have all this propaganda and their newspapers are filled with lies. And we have those poor people. They just don't know what's really going on. Yeah, well, that's us. We're Russia now. We've been lied to. We're just getting fed nothing but propaganda. So the tables have turned.
Really, sounds really hyperbolic, but it's absolutely true. You've seen them publicly legalizing propaganda. You've seen people that used to work for the East German Stasi going over to places like Facebook and Google and places like this. It's literally in your face that what used to be over in the East, all that horrible, dirty world of surveillance and spying and everything else, now it's in the West. And what's worse is we openly welcome it. Now, we'll be coming back on the other side. I'll be asking Charlie his thoughts on Brexit. You need a degree to understand what's going on in Brexit. And even then, do we know what's happening? But lots more to come right here on the Kev Baker Show tonight on TFR Live. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
There we go. I'm joined by Charlie Robinson tonight, the author of The Octopus of Global Control. And before we get back into this, let me remind you that the Kev Baker Show, we are working with our good friends over at getthetea.com. Now, please, please, please go and check out all of the great products over there. And remember, if you do get something, and please, please get something, this is really, really something I want to work long-term with Get the Tea. And it relies on all of you out there as well. You won't only be helping me, but the tea itself, it literally is the tea that is changing America and the world. But remember to let Ronnie and the team know that you heard it here on the Kev Baker Show. And when you have tried it, get in touch with me. We might be able to record a soundbite. I want to know what you think of it, and then we can tell everyone else as well. Because it's one thing me saying it, but when it comes from you out there after you've tried it, it's a whole lot more powerful. And I'm certainly impressed so far. So with that out of the way, let me come back to you, Charlie. And because of everything that's been going on in the background, we were talking during the break about Google and YouTube, and we'll be touching on them in the second half of the show. Very proud to be hooking up with getthetea.com. And it just shows you, Charlie, that there are little companies out there that are willing to support and back shows like this, so that we are able to keep on not competing, but just surviving with all the changes that are taking place, man.
Well, if you have a good product, a healthy product, something that goes against the traditional sort of normal unhealthy items that the Food and Drug Administration approved for use here in the United States, if you are making a product that is healthy then you're going to go after an audience like yours. You're going to go after people that are interested in finding out the truth about all sorts of things. And in this particular case, you've got sponsors that are interested in helping you find out the truth about health and nutrition and things like that. So yeah, people are going to buy their products or if I've got a decision to make between buying a wallet from some wallet manufacturer or one that advertises on the alternative media and everything's the same to me and it looks cool, I would support that sponsor over anything. I mean, I would consider that to be, my people. I'd consider that to be like, that's how you're going to,
it's how we compete with the big behemoths, man.
Yeah,
so,
and vote with your money.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Because this octopus and its tentacles, they're reaching everywhere, folks. They truly are. Even into the smaller kind of outfits like our own here. And this octopus of global control, nothing new. And when I think about the octopus of global control, I start to think of global governance. And then over the years, I've learned that when it comes to a global government, there's going to be different regions around the world that sit independently, but united, become a new world order, a global government. Call it what you may. And one of the major cornerstones in this system, for me, in my opinion, has always been the European Union. You can go back to World War II, where we had somebody called Adolf Hitler who wanted a united Europe. And here we are today in 2018 with a so-called leader called Theresa May, who was opposed to Brexit in the first place. She never wanted it to occur. Well, she has now signed off on a deal that might be Brexit in name, but by all effects, we're still caught up in the tentacles of power that come from Brussels. Now, like I was saying to you, Charlie, for me, the EU is something that they cannot let fail. It's too big to fail, right? And because they've spent so long building this and bringing it together, when the UK people said, well, to heck with this, we don't want 70 to 90% of our laws coming from Brussels. We would like to have our fishing waters back. We don't care if bananas are straight, curved, or whatever they are, as long as they're bananas. The EU was never going to let us leave harmoniously. And we can see right now today, like I say, they say it's Brexit, but in reality, we're still joined at the hip.
Yeah, I remember first hearing Aaron Russo talking about that in his movie, Freedom to Fascism. Talking about how the globalist syndicate wanted to group together nations so that they'd be easier to control. So you take the EU and you group up, 29 different countries into one, yeah. 28 into one group, and then from there you can just control the decision makers, and therefore you have control of all these countries without having to invest the time and effort of controlling 28 individual countries. So you could just sort of get the leadership group compromised and take care of that. And I would say that if you're based in Brussels, then you're probably one step closer to being compromised automatically, because I think that's a pretty sketchy place where a lot of bad decisions have been made for a long time. So,
just on a side note, but I don't think unrelated, one of the hotbeds and centers for people trafficking, child trafficking in the world. No coincidence there, Charlie, I don't think.
No coincidence. Those things go together. In spite of how people would like to separate them and think that they don't exist, they don't coexist. They do. Government groups and child trafficking work hand in hand together. They're not trying to stop child trafficking. It's big business for them. But yeah. And so speaking of that, then you look back to the early days of the EU when people were going, what is this deal? They were giving, the UK's giving up all of their fishing rights. I mean, at the point when they were starting to form the EU, I think Britain had 80% of the fishing waters, and now it's 13%. And everyone was trying to figure out why that was such a bad deal. Why Ted Heath was saying this is a good deal. This is a good deal for fishermen. We got to be a part of the EU. Yes, it gives up part of, gives away some of the fishing rights, but it'll be good for us in the. Of course, everybody listening to that knew that it was a lie, and they were trying to figure out why he was selling that lie so hard. And the reason why he was selling that lie was because he was being blackmailed. He was a notorious pedophile and child murderer, apparently. And the Germans knew that, and they had run brownstone operations on all these people for a long, long time, and they had the goods on him. So when it came time to negotiate that EU, and Ted Heath was involved, I'm sure he got pulled aside, and they said, "Listen, we have some ideas on how this vote should go, and if it doesn't go our way, then we'll just let the world know who you really are." And of course, then he went about selling it like crazy, and now you've got this bad deal, and people are going, "Why are we involved in this?" Well, you're involved in it because you were strong-armed into it by a bunch of people that don't care.
A lot of people outside of the UK, they forget as well that any prime minister, they're the head honcho, right? But of Her Majesty's government, Her Majesty, they work at the behest of the royal family. And you go back to World War II, and you can see how the royals, they had very strong Nazi connections. We can see the video of the Queen when she was a child being taught how to Nazi salute in the back garden. And, this European Union, this is almost, something that the British Empire themselves have been working towards for a long time. And so a government working for the royal family, who were key instruments in uniting Europe under this banner that we see it today, it was never going to happen, Charlie. Just never, ever, ever going to happen. And you're so spot on about the compromised politicians. Who knows what they've got in Theresa May? They must have something, because I believe anyone, and this will offend some people, even Donald Trump, you don't get these high offices of power without having some level of dirt so they can control you, dude.
Yeah, it's true. And I've got a good documentary suggestion for anybody out there. I think we all are familiar, you guys especially, us in the United States are sort of slow to this party, but to understanding who Jimmy Savile was. Cool. And there's a documentary that you can find on your favorite video playing site that the title says, "Was Jimmy Savile a Wizard?" Then it says version V 1.0 full documentary. It's 45 minutes long or 46 minutes long. I highly recommend people watch that, because it shows a very interesting. I mean, I think we all have an understanding of what type of scumbag he was, but it explained his connection to the royal family and why he was given such such power, and why he was so untouchable within that organization. And when you watch that, it also kind of reminds me of how these deals get done. You understand that, like you said, everybody in these high positions of power, they're there for a reason. They're there because the people that put them there want them there, and they want them to be compromised so that they can tell them what to do and make sure that it gets done. And this is not some new revelation. This has been happening for a long, long time. The only difference is that back in the 50s, the dirt they would have on you was that you were cheating on your wife. And then maybe in the 70s, it would be, well, he's actually, a closeted homosexual man. Nowadays, it's pedophilia. And they if they get you in that, if they trap you in that, whether you're actually doing it or whether they've created a scenario that makes it look like you're involved with it, they've got you forever. And so you've got somebody like Ted Heath fighting against his own best interests and against the own best interest of his people, and people are scratching their heads going, "I wonder why that's happening." Well, I'll tell you why it's happening. Because he's being controlled. That's how it gets done. It's dirty. It's something that a lot of people don't want to think about. They like to think that their vote counts and that people get excited on election day and we're going to vote for that. The system is the problem. The system is set up in a way that you can't vote these maniacs out of office. They control the system.
It's rigged. It's a rigged game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some games have better odds than others, but at its core, the casinos, as somebody that lived in Las Vegas for 10 years, the casinos are built by people that are bad at understanding math. They go into the casinos and give their money away because they don't understand how the system works in there. They see it as entertainment and they think they're going to take them, and they don't realize that they're up against something much bigger than them. Same with politics. You want to go into it with best intentions and you're going to clean up the world. You're going to clean it up from the inside. That's noble and that's awesome. But the problem is once you get in there and you realize you can't do that. the system itself is set up in a way that prevents something like that.
There's a name for your new book, dude. Casino politics, man. That's what that's definitely it. But listen, just listening to you there, and for people, and I know I'm going to trigger some people in the conspiracy sphere. It used to be that we all seen through the left-right paradigm, but then along came Donald Trump. But bear this in mind, because we often talk about PNAC and that plan for a new American century. We had the 2001 event. Then we had Wesley Clark coming out in the weeks following that, talking about, quite famously, that speech where the 7 countries, remember? And we all used to point to Bush and his agenda to go after the 7 countries. And then along came Obama. And look at him. He's on the other side and he's going after the same 7 countries. They're all part of the same agenda, right? What does Trump do? He comes along. He says all the right things, but then featuring high on his list of jobs so far has been North Korea, Charlie. And also we're seeing how, Syria, it's still very high on the agenda. And of course, just like his predecessors, he seems to be joined at the hip with countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I've seen somebody in the chat room mentioning Trump's dirty deals with Saudi Arabia over all this Khashoggi kind of slaughter, the execution that took place of the journalist. That, for me, should show anyone that Trump is just the latest puppet pushing the same agenda.
Yeah, I think he got into it with some arrogance, thinking that he was going to change things from the inside. But, it's not that hard to control somebody. It's not that hard to control somebody like Trump. Let's just assume that he was squeaky clean, which he is not. But if he got into that and he had the best of intentions and nobody had any blackmail dirt on him, then they just say to him, listen, this is the way we're going to go. We're going to vote we're going to go follow the path of NATO. We're going to take out the remaining countries that are on that list. And if he steps up to say no to it, they just say, listen, we'll just kill everybody in your family. I mean, it's really as simple as that. And then what? Let's see how tough you are then at that point. I mean, everybody's going to back down. And these are the psychopaths that would do it. So, he can say what he wants to. He can say it on the campaign trail. God knows that enough people have talked on the campaign trail about how they're going to do this and that, and then get into office and do the exact opposite. Most of the time, it's because they're lying during their campaign and they never made any, they never really intended to do it. But if in the event that you were sincere about it and you said these things, really believing you were going to get into office and change it, the minute you had a situation where you had to make the decision on yes or no, bombing Syria, and you said, well, I've been telling people on my campaign that I'm not going to do it, so I'm not going to do it. And they say, actually, you are going to do it, because if you don't, we'll wipe out your whole family and make it look like a plane crash. Exactly. And then he says, oh, okay, well, looks like missiles, bombs away in Syria, and so that's how it happens. And so I can't even really blame him on some levels because it's out of his control. But I do blame people that think that, I think that people that think that Trump was going to get into office, or any politician's going to get into office and all this madness was going to stop. I think that's wishful thinking, because I don't think they understand how the system works. They don't understand how unbelievably devoid of any sort of humanity these people have, that they will do anything to keep their system and themselves in power. And if that means blackmailing a person or setting them up or making things look like suicides, they'll do that. Just look at the Clinton crime family to see plenty of examples. There's no line that they won't cross. And I think people need to understand that, no matter how dark it is.
And what do you make of what's going on at the border just now then, Charlie? Because something else I've learned is, New World Order, they want chaos, as much chaos as possible. From that, they get most work done. Order, right? And, Trump, he's almost been like the master of chaos. And you can look at the kind of protests politically. And now, obviously, with all of his talk of a wall and everything else we've had this caravan moving up through South America. We've got a lot of kind of reports from Alex Jones and others saying that it's funded by George Soros. They're all getting credit cards to make their way towards the US. I've certainly got nothing to disprove that. And anytime any mass people are on the move, George Soros is usually instrumental. But what's your take on what's going on at the border, dude? Because it's hard to really make sense of what's going on.
I think, yeah, I'm with you. Anytime you see a mass migration of people, that's a strategy. There's a plan. It's not like everybody in Central America just woke up one day and said, we should walk to America. That's not how, I mean, people have been coming to America for decades, coming across the border. So why would everybody all of a sudden get into one big group and walk together to 1,000 miles to come to the United States and have massive media attention and camera crews and helicopters following them as they decide to break the law and sneak into the country? That
TV
doesn't
must
make
have been bad that morning. You know, their version of Oprah must have been really bad that morning, and they all thought, to heck with us, we're out of here, Charlie.
Yeah, that's like live streaming your burglary into a building or something. I mean, it is insane. Nobody does that. That's not natural. It's obviously orchestrated. The idea of people coming across the border and sneaking in, like, this is not breaking news. This has been happening for 50 years. If you go to Tijuana, if you're like, someone like me, grew up in Southern California, you go to San Diego, then right over the border is Tijuana. You can, as an American, you can get over that border. You can go drink in all those bars when you're 18, and then you come back across through the border. It's been like this forever. Why all of a sudden is there a massive group of people now today trying to get over the border? And it's because it's a publicity stunt. It is probably some people that legitimately are trying to get over the border. It is probably another group of people that have nothing better to do than take money from organizations that are stirring them up, George Soros style, to make a run at the border. And one of the reasons why I think they're doing this is because they want the president to have to make a decision. We've gone down this path. I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but I think that they want him to make a decision. And when you have thousands of people rushing the border, whatever decision you make is probably going to be bad. If you let them in, half the people are going to hate you. If you shoot tear gas at them, the other half are going to hate you. They're putting you in a position where you're going to have to make decisions that nobody likes. And I think that, I think this has the fingerprints of George Soros all over it. And if people don't believe that, he's done it in Europe. Why wouldn't he do it here?
I'm surprised they haven't got like some kind of color code going on. Usually likes this color kind of things going on in Europe, orange revolution, stuff like that. But one of the images I seen today, and this is what really got me thinking about it, because this was like something that Wag the Dog did. This really dramatic kind of lady who was making a sprint across, it must be, some kind of canyon or something. And her hair's flowing and her face is dirty and it's dead dramatic, right? And in the background, I'm thinking to myself, well, this looks staged. This looks photoshopped anyway. And I get that. That's what happens. But in the background, you can also see other groups of people with photographers who also look as if they're getting staged for action shots as well. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not saying for 1 minute that this caravan of people do not exist, okay? But I tell you what, they are milking it for everything it's worth, Charlie. And the production value around it, that's a big red flag in itself, man.
I think Ole Damigard would have you looking to see if they're all wearing Nikes and if there's Coca-Cola ads in the background, because he's done some pretty good work on how Nike seems to be involved in all of these, quote, events that happen.
Some of the observations are scary because I've done a number of interviews with Ola, and he basically gave me the breakdown, the checklist, what to look for. And it's scary how many times when something starts unfolding, especially when the mainstream give it mass coverage, Charlie, yes, you start to see the buses that Ola's talked about. You start to see, like you say, the clothes, and you're sitting there thinking, this is unbelievable. But true.
He's right, though. This is the
thing. It's unbelievable, but true.
It's unbelievable, but true. And you would think that, he's done some great work in terms of like the advertising behind these things and how you see lots of ads going on. 7-7, the double-decker bus that blew up. There's that big billboard that's right across it that said like something like sheer terror coming your way, for some reason.
Coming to a town near you.
Yeah. All these sort of hidden, these things that you don't notice right away. And as somebody like me with a marketing degree, I can appreciate the marketing aspect of this But I also have to take the Bill Hicks side, which is, and therefore everyone involved in the marketing of this should kill themselves, because this is highly destructive to do this, and it's a crappy thing to do to the people that are coming up from Central America that are legitimately wanting a better life. And
that's what gets me, because just like when we've seen in Europe, I mean, the West have bombed that country into the Stone Age, and don't get me wrong, I know Assad and the civil war going on there as well. A big part to play, right? But I mean, there's genuine people there. And remember, I've seen it in the chat room, and I often say this as well. Borders are nothing more than lines on a map that the elites put there back in the day. And who are we to, deny people that genuinely want to seek better lives, Charlie? But we know that's like a Trojan horse, right? Yeah. Because basically these people are used as almost like a human kind of, I don't know, it's like a cover story for what's really going on.
Yeah, and if you look back into the way the countries were divided up after World War I and World War II, they were the borders were intentionally drawn to cut across multiple ethnicities so that it created a sense of chaos within these countries. They weren't divided up in a natural way in relation to the people that were currently living there. They were divided up in a way that was intentionally creating a sense of division. That's why, like in Iraq, you have different ethnic groups all living within the same country, but hating, part of them hating each other. And that was by design. They could have easily divvied it up in a way that made more sense so that everyone, you keep your little area, we'll keep our area, and that way we won't have all these fights. But that's not what they want. They want constant chaos. They want constant battles. They want people divided against each other so that we focus on them and not focus on the people that are actually responsible for this. I feel bad for the people in Central America that want a better life, and they're coming to the United States. They don't realize that they're being used as pawns in this game. They're being exploited, and their desperation, their legitimate sense of desperation, is being milked by the media and by the government and by the military-industrial complex
to me, Charlie, right? The ones on the way, the kind of wacky left, as I call it, right? The militant left. They're the biggest champions of these people coming into the US. Yet when you look at the policies that these people would put in place if they were in power, they're basically going to turn the US into the same kind of hellhole that these people needed to escape in the first place.
Yep, that's the point. Hey, all these people are leaving Libya and Syria. Yeah, no kidding. We bombed the place. Of course they're leaving. Of course, that's how you want to start a caravan, a migration. Yeah, blow up the country that they're in, and then the people that are still alive will leave. They'll want to get out of there and go somewhere else. And this is why someone like George Soros is a sick bastard, because he creates this intentional chaos as a reason for pushing all these people out, and then he directs them where he wants them to go, say in Germany, where they will not assimilate, and they'll create all kinds of problems. And that's the point. That's what a lot of people are missing, is that the point of these caravans is not to get all these people out and put them someplace where they're safe. The point is to get them and put them in another country where they will not fit in, so that there's even more tension, because that's their plan. They want to keep everyone off guard and off balance, fighting with each other.
We're right on the break, folks, but what an hour of radio this has been so far. This is why I love bringing Charlie on, and I'm really proud that he likes to come back month after month. I mean, this guy goes on shows like Coast to Coast, for goodness sake. So we'll enjoy another hour of this man's mind after the break. Check him out over on Facebook, The Octopus of Global Control, and get the book on Amazon.com. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Charlie Robinson is here with us on the show tonight as we move into hour number 2. And don't forget, KevBakerShow.com is down right now, but not out. We will be back. Don't panic, folks. It's not GCHQ. It's not the NSA. It's not even the Storm Wookiees. It's just a technical problem behind the scenes. So with that said, let me introduce to the show Johnny Whistles. And this is Johnny's first time with Charlie. So I've got 2 comedians that I need to try and handle now. This is going to be brilliant. Johnny, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, Kev. Thanks very much. Yeah, first time on with Charlie, because I I know you hold this man in high regard, Kev, so it's going to be great getting into this. So it's time we had some fun.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I was sharing with Charlie some of my finer photoshoppery during the break, in which yet again Joe Joseph fell victim to me. And this time, what I was doing was I kind of swapped him out with Jim Acosta. And that's that really obnoxious CNN reporter who literally thinks he has got more given right to be in the White House than the president himself. And of course, he's been front and center of the news recently, not because he's hosting it. It's like a journalist's or a reporter's worst nightmare, Charlie. He became the story in the White House, dude. What is that clown all about?
Oh, I think he enjoys being the story in the White House. I don't think that this is has been a bad thing for him at all. He appreciates the attention, and CNN will take the attention where they can get it, because certainly there aren't enough people watching their television channel. They'll take whatever they can get. But I find it ironic that Jim Acosta from CNN, an organization that has a very hard time telling the truth about just about everything, is going to stand up and complain about the news and complain about a journalist's ability to speak and have their questions answered. And at the same time, they pretend like Julian Assange doesn't exist. CNN was Assange's biggest fan when he was exposing George W. Bush and the Republicans. But when he started to expose Obama, then all of a sudden he was a war criminal and he needed to be put away, and we can't tolerate this. So CNN, as an organization, is reprehensible. They're not a news organization. Donald Trump was right. They're fake news. He called it. And the reason why they blew a gasket when he said that is because in their hearts, they know he's true. They know that he was being accurate when he said that. And they so for Jim Acosta to stand up there and throw a big fit about journalism and how dare you do this, as Julian Assange, a journalist, is still essentially in prison and is probably going to either die in that embassy or get black bagged and dragged back to the United States in the middle of the night. It's hypocritical for them to complain about journalistic integrity while they pretend that Julian Assange, is some sort of criminal.
Absolutely. And I just look at them as being like a media wing of the CIA and the FBI, because that's basically all they are. And Whistles, what's your thoughts on all of this, dude?
Well, Charlie's just gave a perfect example there, Kev, of hypocrisy, really, when they talk about what anything to do with the news that they're not allowed to say or whatever. And yet, as he said, they won't even let you know that he's stuck in there in the Ecuadorian embassy that he's stuck in somewhere, do you know what I mean, in London. And to be honest with you, his actions that day, the arrogance for the man to stand up and try to speak over the president of the United States, I really, really, I'm surprised that he's still in a job. But then again, that's CNN for you, do you know what I mean? Because that will go down as a story for them, and they'll use that, Kev, to the best of their ability.
But what's even worse for me is the fact, right, that the peddlers of fake news, Charlie, that CNN are, they then doubled down because they had that altercation where you had the intern standing up to take the microphone off him. And you blatantly see him. Don't get me wrong, right? We were talking about this new kind of religion of I'm offended earlier on. And let's call it what it was. He brushed her arm aside, right? He pushed the lady's arm away. He didn't assault her. He wasn't going to physically attack her or anything like that. But he actually went on to say, as did CNN, as did their rivals at Fox News, that Paul Joseph Watson and InfoWars had made all of that up. They doctored the video, and it never even happened. Now, if that's not like something out of 1984, then I really don't know, Charlie.
But that's what they do. When they can't get in front of these stories, they're forced to react to it. So what they do is they just say, oh, well, this was all a big lie. It's crazy to me. Even when they're like in the face of visual evidence to the contrary, for them to stand up there and say it's a lie is like, I mean, it just goes to show where the corporate media really is. They're fully controlled. It's no secret, really. It's not even debatable. It's been the CIA through Operation Mockingbird has had control of the newsrooms since the 60s. So it's not like this just, we just woke up and when Trump got into office, everyone, decided to, the CIA decided to infiltrate the media. Like this has been going on for half a century. And, I bet Jim Acosta wouldn't stand up and try and talk over Dick Cheney, because he was terrified, as everyone was, of that guy. But with Trump, they get the feeling that, they can slam the people close to him because they don't think that the people close to him will be there for very long, meaning, Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense and press secretaries. And, there's so much turnover there. And they're right, actually. They're right to think that. But, they bent over backwards when Obama was there because they liked him, because they thought he was one of them. And when George W. Bush was in there, they had big problems with him. And they, but when Dick Cheney had something to say, the news media didn't contradict him at all. They were terrified of him. But now Trump's in there. Now Jim Acosta is going to be a big tough guy because Trump's in there. He's going to talk over him. Give me a break. And where were you, Jim, when Dick Cheney and George Bush were invading countries? Where were you standing up? You big hypocrite, you big phony. So this is CNN. This is what you get. You get Wolf Blitzer, a dual citizen with an agenda, and who is on the record saying he fell into journalism because he didn't know what he wanted to do with life, and he applied for a job, and to his surprise, he got it. Those are his words. So you get Jim Acosta and you get Wolf Blitzer, and these are the people that are in charge of the news. Like, can't we do any better than this? This is why InfoWars does well, because people don't want to listen to Jim Acosta and CNN because they're full of it. At least Alex Jones might be right. CNN isn't right.
And let's not forget the man that literally looks like an NPC, the CIA shill, Anderson Cooper. I mean, literally, right from the CIA broadcasting into home near you. It's an absolute joke. Now, what do you think is going to happen with Assange? Because there's been a lot of talk of him maybe being sent to the US to face charges. Personally, I think the guy should be walking free. And, they say that he's connected to this whole Russian agenda for the election rigging and collusion and stuff like this. We're seeing Roger Stone. He's basically looking at maybe going to jail. We've got Jerome Corsi doing a plea deal around that whole thing. When in reality, all of the information that we got that affected the actual election probably, you could argue, came from just Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And of course, for me, all of that was leaked to him, not by Russia, but by somebody within Hillary Clinton's own campaign who paid the very highest price indeed. And that is, of course, Seth Rich. I think he was the one that basically set all of this in motion, Charlie.
Well, CNN has a history of lies, and WikiLeaks has a history of telling the truth. And Assange was very clear about this, that the DNC emails were leaked, not hacked. And there's a difference. Leaked being from the inside, given to him, as opposed to hacked from the outside, Russia. So Hillary Clinton loses the election, as she should, handles it with great class, as she normally does, and then proceeds to blame it all on the Russians for hacking in and getting the contents of the DNC emails, never bothering to discuss the content of the emails, just they were hacked from someone in Russia, therefore they were stolen, therefore it's all lies. I don't know. I'm not following her logic. The reality of the situation is that the emails from the DNC were leaked by Seth Rich to Kim.com and Julian Assange. And the reason why the Democrats and CNN, who is a Democratic organization, let's be honest, hates Julian Assange so much is because he exposed who Hillary Clinton and her group really are. And that's why they lost the election. They didn't lose it because of Russian interference. They lost it because people got a chance to see who these people actually are. And they didn't like him before, and they certainly didn't like him after that. And when Seth Rich turns up dead from a, quote, robbery but they left his phone, his wallet, his necklace, his everything that he had. But he was killed in a robbery with a bunch of sketchy situations surrounding that whole thing. I mean, come on, this is high level espionage. This is what's happening, and Julian Assange exposes this, and of course they want him dead because he's not because he's wrong, but because he's right and he embarrassed them. And of course he knew that. I mean, I don't think he's naive to how they would respond to something like this. And my fear is that he'll die in prison or worse.
I'm surprised we haven't had MI6 or, the SAS or something going in the middle of the night, black bag, off on a rendition flight, never to be heard of again. And I know that I don't understand it really, but I know Assange, he has some kind of opponents, even in the world of conspiracy. Don't know if he's maybe on the level. I've got nothing but, praise for what Julian Assange and what WikiLeaks have done. I really have. I mean, we can find a conspiracy everywhere, I suppose, if we look hard enough. But I think, the fact that he did come out and he was leaking stuff against Bush, and then he had no problem leaking stuff against the other side, that for me showed that he had no agenda. He just wanted to get the information out there, Charlie. And he's one of a few characters that I can think of in our lifetime that has had true journalistic kind of motives.
Well, it's just like Johnny said, this is hypocrisy at its finest. When he was leaking against the Republicans and the Bush administration, CNN thought he was a hero. When he started, leaking against the DNC, then all of a sudden he was a traitor. You can't have it both ways. I think WikiLeaks probably at this point has been compromised. I don't know that, I think that they've probably done all they can do at this point. I would just assume that the CIA has infiltrated them on some level with Julian Assange incapacitated.
Yeah, even if they haven't, I'm sure it would be easy enough for them to inject, fake whistleblowers that would have all the credentials that would check out and, it would look like a legitimate leak. They go and post it. And of course, it'd be littered with disinformation, and that could be used to discredit the organization. Absolutely. Any group that gains any kind of idea of power, you just know that they're going to try and corrupt it and co-opt it in some way. We've been talking about the media here, the dinosaur dying media, as I like to look at them. And, that's just the way of the world. Things are changing. The internet's absolutely eradicated everything. And the news, that's definitely one thing that's been affected a lot. And that's what gave birth to an alternative media in the first place. But now, Charlie, me in particular, we can look at my kind of case as a test study. They're certainly dialing back on any alternative voices out there, be it on YouTube, be it on Twitter, be it on any of these big websites. And I get people will say, well, go to one of the alternatives, but, your Googles and your Facebooks have just become too big. And that's where the game is. And if you're not playing there, you're really not reaching the people you're trying to.
Yeah, and people want to, they want to create new platforms, BitChute and Gab and places like that. But, we saw what happened with the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, where the shooter had a Gab account, and then the next thing you know, everybody is, we've got to shut down the whole platform.
Well, why didn't that happen? You had the Anders Breivik over here in Europe that done the Norway massacre. You've had all these other mass kind of killings in America. They've all had Facebook accounts. They've all been posting on there. I didn't see Facebook getting closed down on the back of that.
No, and the guy who did the shooting in the synagogue had a Twitter account. Twitter's still up. I mean, if the whole point is we've got to take this down, this is hate speech, we have to take. Well, then let's be consistent here. The reality of the situation is that it has nothing to do with hate speech. It has to do with targeting platforms that are alternative media or alternative friendly to alternative media like Gab to make them look like they're just housing, Ku Klux Klan rallies on their site and things like that, which, of course, is not anywhere close to the reality. So the fact that, they had an agenda to shut them down and then they just worked backwards. If anything bad happens, if any of these shootings happen, whether they're real or staged, they'll take a look at the person. Do they have we're trying to shut down, let's say, BitChute, Gab, and a couple others. Oh, this guy's got a Gab account? Great. Let's use that against him. Let's make it that he was on there, inciting violence, and that this is all wouldn't have happened if his Gab account had been taken down. I mean, give me a break. The reality is that now, after doing that, they just gave Gab like $50 million worth of free advertising. So I think they're back up online. I
think they're back up, yeah. But I mean, that was ridiculous, that whole thing. And you've got YouTube, and we were talking about the EU earlier on. And don't get me wrong, right? I'm not taking the side of Google and Alphabet and feeling sorry for them and thinking that they've got my back in any way, right? Because in reality, they could have affected Article 11, Article 12A, and Article 13 a long time before now, despite the fact they're over on YouTube making a big song and dance about how it's going to affect everyone, and they're trying their hardest. The power of lobbying, and more importantly, the power of the buck. They could have lined a good few pockets over in the EU to basically head this off at the pass if they had wanted to. But now we're staring down the barrel of a gun, Charlie, where come February, any future shows that we do, if I'm to upload it to YouTube, and I'm even to include your Octopus of Global Control logo, if I can't prove to YouTube that you've given me permission to use that, and even then, they will block that content from being uploaded at the source of upload. It just won't appear on YouTube. And if I do somehow get it uploaded, maybe I'll just film like a crack on the table or something for 2 hours while we're talking, right? I can prove that's my copyright. Even then, they won't risk it going out in the US or beyond the EU, just in case somebody else claims that crack in the table is their copyright in the future. The internet is becoming regionalized, as I said to you before the show. Things are really becoming smaller, and it's becoming more controlled, and you can see it now. It's right in your face. Call it censorship, call it what you will. This is just the way the internet is now going, in my opinion.
And it's scary. It seems like a dress rehearsal in Europe for what's coming to the United States. I mean, I wonder what's going to happen when you've got YouTube and you've got these companies that are big toy manufacturers or video game producers that have these people that play video games and record it and then post it to their channel. And the toy companies or video game manufacturers are totally on board with this because it's free advertising. You get guys that have like 10 million subscribers and all they do is play video games and talk the whole time. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to cut them off? I mean, technically they're using somebody else's content without their permission, but let me guess that those are probably going to still be up and running with no issues there. I mean, I wonder if it'll just be selective targeting of, these sites, these web, these channels, the Kev Baker Show, we got to watch out for them because they talk about alternative things. So we have to make sure that they can't, tie your hands behind your back so you can't use any content from anyone. You do a pretty good job of just using your own content anyway. I don't know why there would be a problem, but it looks like that's not the point. It looks like they're looking to ban you and working backwards.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't love to hype it up, but there's other shows I imagine would hype it up and say, look, they're coming after me because of the stuff we talk about on here. But when you look at the broad range of channels that got hit in that round of demonetization, this is just across the board. It really, really is. But it's getting to the point now where, I mean, where will people hear this kind of information unless they hear it live? And even then, are we going to come to a stage where we're on TFR? So if I was to play a clip that may be claimed as copyright in the future, are Chris and Cherie going to be liable and taken to court? Because the same rules will apply to them as applies to the bigger websites like Google and Facebook, because it'll be the website that hosts the material that will be liable for this. So alternative radio networks, how are they going to fare in the months and years to come? And it gets ridiculous because we were talking about Article 11 as well, Charlie. And we've been posting memes in here in the Skype chat. I mean, that one of Jimmy Savile, scumbag that he is. They're trying to ban things like that because that'll be possibly Reuters or somebody who owns the rights to that image Well, you're not going to be able to repost that on Facebook, social media, anywhere at all, or the same rules apply. There's going to be a link tax and a meme tax as well. And I think this is more to do with the power of the meme as opposed to lining the pockets of those content creators like Reuters and everyone else that owns the right to these images. This is about the fact that memes are very powerful, and they've always been used throughout history, haven't they?
How funny would it be that if the one thing that took down the whole dirty, rotten, crooked empire were memes?
The NPC one, I tell you what, the NPC one had a real ripple effect.
Oh my God, people lost their minds. I think that people lost their minds because they connected with it, and the people that were guilty of being like that, I think that it bothered them so much because in their soul they realized, oh, this is about me. this is not, all these memes are making fun of everybody else, and then all of a sudden you see one and you're like, wait a second, this one is actually directed at me and I'm offended by. Well, I hope they found their safe space. I hope they were able to cuddle up and get out of, turn their computer on because it was hurting their feelings. I mean, everybody just needs to get a grip and toughen up a little bit.
World? Not even toughen up. Just get back to where we were 20 years ago, where men were men and words didn't offend people. And we just got on with things. And we didn't divide ourselves down to the point where, the people that we like, be it homosexuals, be it heterosexual. I mean, all of that stuff. I mean, each to their own. But don't let it divide us to the point where we're all at each other's throats and getting offended by the way we look at one another. The world's gone bat crap crazy, Charlie. I tell you, just go back to the time when I was a child, 40 years ago. Johnny, you'll be able to relate to this as well, man. And I'm not saying it's the internet that's to blame for all of this, right? But the internet wasn't there at that point. Now, maybe it's just me, but the world seemed to work just fine then. And, if somebody said something out of place, somebody would say something to them and you would get on with it. No tears, no crying, no going to the police, no getting fined and thrown in jail for thinking one way or another. We need to get back to our near past, folks, or else, I don't know where this ends.
Well, Kev, I'm opposite of you, mate. I do blame the internet because, like to myself, you and I, when we were kids, we were never in the house, never in. You ate your dinner that quick that you put the rest of it on a sandwich so you could eat that running out the door so you could go and play football. And it's like you go on a bus now. Nobody talks. There's nobody talking. Everybody is all looking at their phone. It's changed so much, and it's really for the worst because we're losing touch now with people. As you said, you could remember like about maybe 6 or 7 of your pals' phone numbers. Do you know what I mean? We don't even know we're on now. Do you know what I mean? It's got that convenient for us just to press a button.
It's worse, Johnny, because, they tell us that they're hiding characters of our phone number, but they leave the last 3 there. And it's down to the point now where I think most people know the last 3 digits of their phone number, but that's about it.
It's getting bad. Do you know what I mean? As you say, if you want to go back to, like, when you were a child, kid, then you would just, the only thing that you could do is get rid of the internet. But then again, you would have people committing suicide all over the world, so I'm not sure if that's a good thing either.
And again, it's that double-edged sword, and we'll discuss this with Charlie on the other side of the break. For all of the bad stuff the internet is absolutely responsible for, here we are tonight, connected to the US. I'm connected to the far side of Scotland from where I am. And we are beaming into the bedrooms, the cars, the homes of all of you out there at basically the speed of light. And of course, the internet gives us all of that knowledge at our fingertips. How we use that is up to the individual user. But yes, Johnny is right. The thing that's connected us most has been the thing that has disconnected us most physically. And we'll get into this on the other side because this is good stuff. And no doubt we'll be asking Charlie about his take on the space landing today that took place. Yes, that's right. NASA have been at it again. And I had a really surreal moment during watching the whole landing process of this latest piece of apparatus to hit Mars. And I'll share that with you after the break. And don't forget, coming up after tonight's show, we've got Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew on the way. I'll be back tomorrow night as well. Chris Geo will be joining me tomorrow. We'll be talking about Eye of Life and all the good stuff. But one more segment to come with Charlie Robinson and the man himself, Johnny Whistles. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Moving into the final part, unfortunately, of tonight's show, right here on the number one network. Come on, tell me, there's no better network than this, folks. www.tfrlive.com. Truth Frequency Radio, where silence is consent, and where I'm able to bring guests of the ilk of Charlie Robinson onto the show. He's the author of the book called The Octopus of Global Control. And as you can tell, month after month he comes back and we're able to talk about absolutely anything and everything. And Charlie, before we do get back into it, let people know where they can get their hands on this book of yours, man.
Sure, you can get it on Amazon as a Kindle and as a paperback, and you can also get it at Barnes & Noble's, barnesandnoble.com as a paperback and as an ebook. If you don't like Jeff Bezos and you don't want to give him money, you can buy it there as well.
Jeff Bezos. He's another one with a face like an NPC.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg, if you stood them side on, they look like classic NPC drawings. That's disturbing, boys.
I wonder if Zuckerberg's going to get into like the HGH and start, doing major arm curls like Bezos, because Bezos is jacked these days.
You see pictures of him like 20 years ago. Tell me that dude hasn't swapped out with his alter from the other universe, man. That's not the same guy anymore.
That guy has definitely got some extra spare bodies of his clones of himself in his garage somewhere.
Absolutely. Now, talking of these tech gurus and, these big companies, before the break, we were talking about the internet, Charlie, and Johnny makes a really great point, that for all of the kind of good that it's brought us, it's been the one major thing that's really kind of torn us apart as well. Yet at the same time, here we are talking via the internet. And I think it's like most things, isn't it? It's a double-edged sword, and it's very much down to that individual user, how we put it to use, right?
Yeah, and I'm guilty of doing that, like being on my phone in public places and paying attention to it. It's a bad habit, and I acknowledge that I need to be better about that. And I see kids doing it too, and I think, oh God, if I'm doing it now and I'm addicted to it, how are kids going to? They're never going to come off of it. They'll always sort of had their head in a tablet or in a phone, and of course that's not good, especially when you read stories of how Silicon Valley executives are hiring nannies and telling the nannies, instructing them to make sure that their kids have no screen time in front of phones and tablets and things like that. So if they think it's bad and they're the ones manufacturing it, maybe we should keep our eyes open. But yeah, I have to confess I'm not good at
points to make, Charlie. I really do. You hit upon something that needs emphasized time and time again. The people who dominate these industries, the people behind Apple, behind all your smartphone companies and everything else, they do not let their children anywhere near it. Now that, for me, trumps any kind of medical studies that most people won't take the time to look through. And when you realize that these people are saying, not for my kids, that should really make you think, what's going on here?
Yeah, Steve Jobs said something about it too before his death, but talking about how he would never let his kids in front of one of those screens. Now, I understand televisions, there's a certain flicker rate, and it puts your brain into a different, a different brainwave pattern. And you have, of course, on your network, you have tons of great people talking about stuff like that, like Dr. Brooks Agnew and people that can get into that better than I can. But if it's working that way for television, I don't know why we would be surprised that it's that way for cell phones and for tablets and laptops as well.
And it used to be, Johnny, they would say to you, get back from that TV. You'll end up with square eyes, right? You'd end up at the other side of the room. And yet now you've got a 4K kind of display, the brightest and most colourful lights known to man that we've got in technology. And we've got it, 2 inches from our eyeballs?
You see, that's the thing about it, Kev. Even with one of these TVs, my eyes are that bad that I still have to go close to it anyway.
The guy
So
where I grew up
whatever it is beaming, Kev, I'm getting it in abundance.
The guy used to be in Fort Augustus where I grew up. He was a character, John. So you can imagine a character up in the Highlands of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
This was a man and a half, and he always used to say, something like that. If your eyes aren't working, just get them out. Just get new ones. Just get them out. And that was his kind of go-to rule for anything that was wrong in the entirety of the. If your lungs aren't working, we'll get them out. They're done. Just get them out. Spacesuit's gone. Done. Mm-hmm. Yep, character. But talking of spacesuits, Charlie, before the show tonight, I emailed you and I alerted you to the fact that we were getting a high-value production put on by the actors and actresses over at NASA. Now, I'm only kind of being sarcastic, but we had a big kind of event today. We had the InSight mission. They touched down successfully on the surface of Mars. Now, I was sharing before the break that I had a bit of a surreal moment because just when we were waiting for that first telemetry to come back from the red planet, there's that horrible kind of gap where the signal's traveling. Is it going to be good news, bad news? Is there a signal at all? It says we're just going to cut to, or we're just waiting to hear from Dr. Bruce Banner. I'm thinking, where do I know that name from? And it dawned on me, dude. All I could think of from that point forward was somebody, trying not to get too agitated in the control room in case he'd been the Hulk.
Well, I hear that Lex Luthor was very happy with the landing. It fit perfectly with his telemetry data, the same data that I'm sure will be thrown away by NASA at some point. And we should congratulate them on landing on the Mars. And I know they did it because NASA told us they did it. So that must mean that they actually did it. There was no video or anything. It was just a bunch of guys in a room cheering at the same time. And I hate to be so cynical, but
there was one photograph that looked like the bottom of a dirty petri dish. That looked like Mars.
Yeah.
Just
probably
take the word for it. Just have faith. Trust the plan, Charlie.
Yeah. I would be willing to trust NASA if they were willing to give me a real answer on where the footage of the actual first moon landing went and the telemetry data. They got rid of it. They recorded over it. I mean, as long if they're willing to give me a satisfactory answer as to why they did that, then I'd be willing to listen to them when they get excited about landing on Mars or landing on Jupiter or wherever they think they're going. But until that, I'm sorry. This is an organization that has a very difficult time telling the truth, and they are not to be trusted. I don't believe anything they say. Nothing.
It's okay because where I'm from, over in the motherland, we've got Roscosmos, right? That's the kind of big kind of rival to NASA. And they assure me that they're going to be sending a couple of cosmonauts up there soon on a return. Well, it's probably their first mission to the moon that they're telling us about. But they're determined to prove or disprove the actual moon landings. They're going looking for the flag, dude. And I think we'll be able to trust what the Russians tell us about the moon more than what we heard from Buzz.
That is a moon mission I could get on board with for sure. Let's hear it. Let's hear let's see what they found. I've never understood, and maybe I just need a background in astronomy or something, but I've never understood why we weren't able to just focus high-power telescopes on the moon and see the landing spot. Can't we see it? Can't we look up there? I mean, we can see the backside of Pluto. Why can't we see the front side of the moon? Why can't we see where the flag is? I'm not talking about a telescope that I've got, but
just trust the plan.
I'm trying to trust the plan, but the plan is really, really lame.
There's a lot of the plan. I admit that, but this is where the faith part comes into it. They were there, Charlie. Somebody messaged me to say that this latest landing on Mars, Johnny, this is just the latest Capricorn 1 mission. Now, that's a good movie. And if anyone hasn't seen that movie from back in the day, that's certainly one thing that got me thinking about the moon landings, John, when I first seen that, right?
Yeah, definitely. But this one, as you said, I mean, the very first picture that they show you from Mars.
John.
I mean, they could...
It looks like iron brew with some dirt in it.
If that is a picture, then I would have faked one, Kev.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I really would have faked one to make it look a bit better. Because, as you say, it looks like something in a petri dish. It looks like a disease. Weird.
Looks like an alien virus. But, there's a lot of people, Charlie, that say that even the photos or even news of NASA putting anything on Mars, absolutely fake. Now, my opinion, I can't prove it. I don't have any guests up on Mars yet. Once Elon Musk goes up there, I'll try and change that. But, I certainly do think that they do have craft up there on Mars, stuff like that. Whether we get any truth about what comes back in the data, now that's a different thing altogether.
Well, I like what Catherine Austin Fitts and Mark Skidmore have done, where they've discovered the missing $21 trillion of Department of Defense and HUD spending that has disappeared. They talk about that being used for the secret space program. We've had this conversation before about this. It's fascinating. It's probably the most interesting topic that you can discuss as to what's really going on. I think most people that have looked into NASA understand that this is some sort of like fake, almost like a stage production. Like you're pretending. I think they're doing some work, but pretending to have a space mission. Intentionally using liquid fuel rockets and things like that are really outdated. The fact that we're still trying to get to space with these that we used 50 years ago is kind of embarrassing. But I think the reality is that there's a much different program behind the scenes, one that has been financed through covert funding mechanisms like stealing the money and all the ways that these secret agencies fundraise.
Do you think Bezos and Musk will have been let in on certain aspects then of the secret space stuff? Here's two cats who are going to have craft up there leaving the planet. There's a chance they're going to see things that maybe they're not meant to, whether it's on Mars or on the way there. Do you think they're in the know when it comes to this secret space program? And we're not going the blue chicken route. We had a laugh with that last time. We're just talking about maybe technologies that we don't know about here on Earth.
I don't know. I those are both two very smart guys. Elon Musk seems to have a pretty firm grasp on rocketry. He's got to know that getting to Mars with liquid fuel is not the way to go. He's got to understand that, right? Doesn't he understand that there has to be a different method of propulsion for in order to get anywhere? The math on the liquid fuel rockets show that like you have to have 3 Empire State Building sized fuel tankers just to get the thing out of the atmosphere and up to at a velocity to get them out and to Mars. And then I
don't know why they haven't gone for some kind of lunar option, because if you're launching things from the lunar surface, then you're totally negating all that escaping the gravity. And you can start to look at these alternative propulsion systems. It always made more sense to me, not that I'm the kind of billionaire that's going to be able to do anything like that, but would make more sense, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of them have talked about that too. It makes more sense to have a base outside of Earth's orbit, considering that's where it requires the most fuel to get through. So to have a base on the
Mars, you're talking about a 7-month journey to get there. I don't even know how long does it take for the signal to reach here. It's not instantaneous. So it's just not. I don't see it as being practical to go to Mars first. And Whistles, I'll bring you in here because you're a space aficionado or a wooianado like the rest of us. I think it'd make more sense to go and conquer, not conquer, that makes it sound like we're invading the place, but, build something on the moon first, John.
Well, we could do that, Kev, but the thing is, I think it's like they're looking for more information before anything else, do you know what I mean? Because they know what the moon's made of, they know what's up there, they know what they can get. So it's the why are we going to the Mars thing. Now, if you're looking for life on Mars, it's not going to be like anything that's going to be much interest. Well, to anybody that wants to see an alien, that is, because it'll be microbial life. what I would like them to do is maybe go out to Europa and get into the water that's in Europa, because there's a liquid ocean under that ice. The ice is, I don't know how thick it is, Kev, but this is the kind of thing that we should be going to, because there must be things under there, not microbial life that we know there is even on there, Kev, because of the amount of methane that's coming off Mars. So I would like to go out further and explore and see what's there.
Definitely, that's probably going to be one of the first stops, Charlie, when they go beyond Mars. I was watching a movie not long ago. It wasn't Europa, but this was called Titan. And they were going up to Titan, and obviously conditions far different there, right? Long story short, I used to have dreams about humanity going out into the cosmos, and it'd be like Star Wars or Star Trek, something like that. But even just to go to a moon around Jupiter, around Saturn, we're going to have to basically genetically modify humans as we know them to something beyond what it is to be human anymore, if we're even to get out to the furthest parts of our own solar system, dude. That's quite depressing, because I was looking forward to that whole Stargate future,
Well, to follow up on the Europa thing, Johnny, if you've ever seen the movie 2010, it's the sequel to 2001. It's not a Kubrick movie, but it's the sequel to it. I think it came out in 86 or so. It's one of my favorite movies. I've seen it so many times. But in that movie, they go to Jupiter to find the monolith there that has expanded, and it's eating the entire planet. And what they discover while they're circling Europa was chloroform on the planet, and that's part of the. I'm not going to spoil the ending of the movie, but it's really the movie is based around Jupiter, but in particular Europa, and how it's frozen, and how that they were finding life under there. And I wonder sometimes, I know there's fiction, and I know that there's science fiction, and I know that there's a genre of movies that are meant to be not based on truth, but I wonder how much truth really is in some of these movies. I wonder if it's a leaking out of information in advance. But in that movie, they talk about Europa, and the signal from Europa says, attempt no landings here. And that is, because they found life there. And it's a really great movie. I highly recommend people watch it. It's very different from 2001. It's not meant to be a trippy thing like that.
Now you're talking our language, Charlie. You really are, because this is the whole revelation of the method, I would call it. They hide things in plain sight. And I absolutely believe that, not all of the sci-fi genre, and you can look at a lot of movies, even these vampire ones that have been quite common nowadays, people with superpowers and stuff like that. And you can take some of the stuff in there, and you can see how it ties into the agendas of today, and also the occult groups of the past, stuff like this. So absolutely, I think they probably are hiding more than we would find comfortable, to be honest with you, if we were to realise it was actually fact above fiction. But somebody in the chat room mentioned Oumuamua, and that's the space rock that keeps on giving. Don't know if you followed that story, Charlie, or if we've discussed it before, but it seems to me the more time goes on, usually the kind of academics, they dispel all of the conspiracy and all of the alien woo. But this has been the exact opposite, because I think it was Harvard or the Smithsonian, they put a paper out saying that, by golly, that this could well have been alien.
Yeah, and that was great. Normally, Harvard is in the disinformation industry, but and they might be in this case as well. But it really was, like you said, it was backwards. It was the exact opposite of what you expect. Normally, you find some independent scientist who says something like that, and then some jerks from Harvard will say, no, that's not true. That's not how it works. This is disinformation or blah blah blah. I think in this particular case. That was interesting to see that, and it got a ton of publicity all at the same time, and of course, a lot of pushback. But fascinating. If you were trying to travel, and you from star system to star system, and you couldn't do it at light speed or through stargates and things like that, how would you do it? Well, you would dress yourself up like something that is normally floating through that area, burrow down into the center and use that as a spaceship. That's part of where the book Who Built the Moon, I'm looking at my copy of it right now.
The more I think about it, the more that makes sense, Charlie.
For sure it does.
Like I said before on the show, the Wright brothers, we looked at birds, how they flew. Even Da Vinci, he was doing that back in the day. So you look for the one natural thing that does what you're wanting to achieve naturally. In this case, like you say, travel through space. Well, is there anything that naturally does that with no problems? Well, yep, we've got asteroids and comets. Well, why don't we use something like that? I think that makes so much sense.
I do too. I think that if you were, it would be an effective method for propulsion. If you had something like a comet, it would be a great disguise. It would keep you under the radar. If there happened to be other things out there that noticed you, if you were doing it, that's how you would do it. And so that makes people think about, how is it that the moon is 1/400th the size of the sun and it's 1/400th the distance from the sun, making a full solar eclipse possible? You could say that it's natural and that it could have happened, and I guess it could have. I mean, the numbers are pretty low, but I think that a more reasonable, I think somebody that's looking at the statistics behind it would say, well, that's a pretty big coincidence that something like that just happened to get parked right in the perfect place to control the tides. And although it's a crazy thing to say, it is not unreasonable to question whether that was a natural act or whether that was put in its place by design.
And would we even be able to live life as we know it without the moon being there? You mentioned the tides. I've also heard how research says that women's menstrual cycles are tied to the moon. We also hear about how when it's a full moon, lunatics, right? Lunatic. I think that is specifically here. That is so important to our existence here, Charlie. Again, it would probably scare people and bamboozle them to realize just how much of a part the moon plays in everything.
I'm so fascinated by the moon too, because it's such a mysterious thing. It's so close. We can see it all the time. We still don't really fully understand it. Like you said, it has stabilized this planet, and it is fair to say that it's given us the opportunity to have life. But there's ancient legends of it not being there, a time before the moon, and how it was dragged there, and I mean all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'm fascinated by it.
And actually, I mean, it's quite irregular compared to other moons. I mean, most other planets have got various kind of naturally orbiting satellites, but this one, like you say, just so perfect. Just that exact measurement it needs to be, just exactly where it needs to be. And yes, like you say, so many ancient kind of stories and folklore about how the moon was taken here. And David Icke, funny we should finish up where we started off tonight. It was him that really opened my eyes to somebody called Credo Mutwa, and he was the head of the Zulus, as you'll probably know. And he talks about the two brothers that brought the actual moon here. So who honestly knows, man? I'm very open to the fact that we're an entirely engineered species, and right down to the moon in the sky, all brought here by design.
I'm more inclined to believe Zulu folklore than I am NASA.
Absolutely, dude.
Because at least I don't pretend to think that they have some sort of agenda, whereas NASA, I feel, has an agenda to continue justifying their big budgets that they have. I'm fascinated in the moon. I just don't think NASA's the group that can be trusted to give us the full information on it. I mean, are there people there? Are there, is it hollow? Are there people underground? All these things are really interesting to talk about.
The Lacrosse mission by NASA, where they literally bombed it with a kinetic energy weapon, and it rang like a bell.
Yeah, mm-hmm. yeah. That's not supposed to happen on a natural
star, dude.
For sure. Yeah, and so we go back to the whole reality and movies bringing reality in and making it look like fiction. You've got is it Enceladus? One of the planets one of the moons that looks exactly like the Death Star. And so, that's you wonder, is George Lucas just really lucky?
And then you that weird tabby star, the Dyson Sphere, one day soon try and get invaded by vacuum cleaners. We've got it all to look forward to, man. You know what I mean?
Right, I think that's what the moon was, Kev, as you say. I think they must have just got an old Dyson sphere from a scrapyard somewhere and gave it to us just to keep us here.
Maybe we could put in for a grant to pimp out our Death Star. I don't know, it's an idea, but one thing we should do is we'll paint ourselves an octopus of lunar control on the top of it, Charlie. Do you like that?
Yes, of course. If you look at my logo for my book, it is a logo from the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. It's the logo that they put on their satellite, on their rocket that took their satellite to above the Earth, and their logo says "Nothing is out of our reach." And I took that off and put the Octopus of Global Control, but used the same octopus.
Nothing to be too creepy there, then, my man. No,
nothing to see here. Just some spy satellites that we're not telling you about.
Well, Charlie will hopefully. You will be back next month, won't you, Charlie?
I'll be back. Yes, I will.
Absolutely. I've had a blast tonight. I hope all of you have enjoyed the show as well. We'll be back tomorrow night with Chris Geo. He'll be joining me here on the show, so I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm hoping you'll be there for hour 2 tomorrow, Jono. And yes, another week commences here. And on Thursday night, we've got a brand new guest coming onto the show to talk about his book. His name is Patrick Woods. More details about that tomorrow. So you'll have to be here to hear all about it. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Remember, wherever you are, make it T, F, and R.
And dinna touch that dial.